You wake up on cool marble. The ceiling above you is painted. Gods, chariots, a sky that isn't yours. Someone is already standing at the foot of the bed, waiting. Not a friend, a slave. He has been awake for hours, because his morning doesn't begin until yours does. Outside, a city of 1 million people is stirring, and a surprising number of them already owe you money. It is roughly 70 BC. The city is Rome, and you are Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in the richest city on earth. Most people would tell you that you've just won, that from here everything is easy. They're wrong. You're about to learn that the largest fortune in the world can buy almost anything, and that the one thing it can't buy is the exact thing that will eventually kill you. Level 1. The fortune. Start with the number. Ancient writers put your fortune at around 200 million sesterces, close, it was said, to the entire annual revenue of the Roman treasury. One man, holding something near what the state holds. A professional soldier earned a few hundred sesterces a year. You could have paid an entire army out of pocket for years and barely noticed. But the money teaches you something fast. In Rome, wealth is not coins in a vault. Coins are almost the least of it. Your wealth is land and buildings and silver mines and, most of all, people. Thousands of people you legally own. You don't feel rich the way a modern person imagines. You feel less like a man with a balance and more like a machine that other lives feed into. And it never stops running, even while you sleep. Level 2. How you got it. Now the part the statues leave out. Some of it you inherited, but the leap from rich to richest came from other people's ruin. When the dictator Sulla posted the proscriptions, public death lists, the victim's property seized and sold cheap, most Romans looked away in horror. You saw a market and bought the estates of the condemned before the bodies were cold. Then there's the fire. Rome is timber and tight streets, and it burns constantly. So you built a private fire brigade, 500 trained slaves. When a building caught, you didn't put it out. You found the terrified owner and offered to buy the burning building and his neighbors' buildings for almost nothing. Agree, and your men doused the flames. Refuse, and you watched it burn. Block by block, you bought much of Rome from people on the worst day of their lives. Add the silver mines, the estates, the thousands of slaves, architects and craftsmen you trained yourself because a skilled slave is worth 10 unskilled ones. You didn't just own wealth, you manufactured it out of other people's disasters. That's the quiet truth behind the number. A great fortune is rarely one good idea. It's being the last one standing, cash in hand, when everyone else is falling. Level 3. What it buys. What does the largest fortune in the world actually buy you here? Not comfort. You have that, and it bores you within a week. In Rome, money buys power through people. You spend it on clients, ordinary Romans who trade loyalty and votes for your protection, and on senators, lending widely and often interest-free to the right men until half the Senate owes you. A favor given is a leash, and you hold hundreds. You spend it on the crowd, public feasts for the whole city, grain for thousands of families. And when 70,000 slaves rise under Spartacus and shred every army Rome sends, it's you who fund and lead the legions that break them, lining 100 miles of road with 6,000 crucifixions. With that money and that name, you do what no coin could do alone. You form a secret pact with the two other most powerful men in Rome, Pompey and a young, indebted, ambitious Julius Caesar, whose career you practically fund. 3 men now quietly run the Republic. And this is exactly where the trap closes. But the real machinery is quieter than a triumvirate, and you run it every single morning. Before dawn, they are already at your door. It's called the salutatio, the morning greeting, and it is the beating heart of Roman power. Clients, petitioners, senators who need a loan, magistrates who need a favor, men who want their son placed, their debt covered, their rival prosecuted. They line your entrance hall in their best togas and wait for you to notice them. Some have been coming for years. You know exactly what each of them is worth, and you are careful, endlessly careful, to be liked. You greet ordinary Romans by name, thousands of them, because a man remembered is a man who owes you a small debt of pride. You never refuse to take a case in the courts for someone beneath you. You are courteous to the humblest citizen and patient with the most tedious. It costs you nothing, and it buys you something no coin can. A feeling, spread across the whole city, that Crassus is approachable, that Crassus is generous, that Crassus is on your side. But behind the easy smile, you are counting. You are always counting. Every name learned, every favor done, every hand shaken is one more thread added to the web, and the web is the true fortune. The gold is only what you use to weave it. You have a private rule about money, and it tells you everything about how you think. No man, you say, should call himself rich unless he can afford to pay an entire army out of his own pocket. Not the state's money, his own. By that definition, almost no one in history has ever been rich. You are. So you spend the way a general moves troops. You bankroll elections, because in Rome, votes are bought almost openly, and the man who funds the winner owns a piece of him. You quietly back candidates for consul, for praetor, for the courts. Juries can be reached. A prosecution can be aimed at an enemy, or made to quietly disappear. You hold stakes in the tax farming companies that squeeze the provinces, so gold flows to you from lands you will never even see. And then there is Caesar. He is brilliant and charming, and drowning in debt so deep his creditors won't let him leave the city to take up his post in Spain. So you step in. You guarantee his debts, an enormous sum, and just like that, the most dangerous man of the coming century walks free. And he walks free because of you. You think you have bought yourself an asset. You will not understand for years that you have just funded your own eclipse. This is what your money actually is. Not coins. Leverage. 1,000 invisible threads running from your hand into the Senate, the courts, the elections, the provinces, the streets. Pull one, and something moves. But here's the thing nobody warns you about owning everyone. When every man who smiles at you wants something, you slowly lose the ability to tell the difference between affection and appetite. The senator who praises you needs a loan. The friend at your table is keeping a private account. You can sit in a room full of people who owe you everything and be more completely alone than a beggar. You told yourself the money was the point. It was never the point. It was only ever the leash. And a leash runs in both directions. Level 4. What it can't buy. Because in Rome, a man is measured not by money, but by gloria. Glory. And glory has one source that cannot be bought. Victory in war. Pompey has it. Pompey the Great. Caesar is about to carve his name into Gaul. And you? You're the banker. The one whose money makes other men's glory possible. You crushed Spartacus, and Pompey mopped up the stragglers and stole the applause. You can feel it. The richest man alive, aching for the one currency his fortune can't mint. It doesn't matter that it's irrational, that you already have everything. The gap between what you own and what you're respected for is the only thing you can feel anymore, and it itches like a wound. That's the quiet cruelty of a fortune like yours. It solves every problem money can solve so completely that all you're left with is the one it can't. Level 5. The trap. So you make a decision a poorer, safer man never would. You are past 60. You have more money than the state, and you decide to go and win yourself a war. You choose Parthia. Rich, vast, unconquered. Beat it, and you'll finally have your glory. You raise the legions yourself and march east, chasing the one thing you could never buy. At a place called Carrhae, it ends. The Parthians don't fight the way Rome expects, mounted archers who circle at a distance and rain arrows, never closing, never running out, because camels bring fresh ones up behind. Your heavy infantry, the terror of the known world, stands in the heat and is shot to pieces by an enemy it can't reach. Tens of thousands die in the sand. Your son is killed, his head carried back to be shown to you. And then you are killed too. The Romans told a story about how it ended, and whether or not it's literally true, it survived because it was true enough. They said the Parthians poured molten gold down your throat, a final, mocking answer to a lifetime of thirst. You wanted gold. Here, drink. So you woke up as the richest person in the ancient world. You could buy estates, mines, votes, senators, armies. You bought your way into the room where the republic was decided, and none of it, not one sesterce, could buy the single thing you actually wanted. So you went looking for it in the one place your money had no power, and it killed you. That's the oldest lesson hiding inside the richest life. Money buys everything that can be bought, and the things that can't be bought are the only things a man like you will ever truly want. You started the day with more than a kingdom. You'd have traded all of it for a little glory, and in the end, that's exactly the trade the world made you.